All right. Great to be joined today by Greg Quinn, founder and principal at X Design, a leading interior design firm here in the Toronto area. And this morning, we're going to be talking about design and market trends within the X Design and Encore space, the intersection of commercial real estate and interior design. And I know there's been a lot of movement afoot with rising price increases on everything from current lease rates per square foot, as well as furniture and the opportunity for clients to basically be doing more with less. So excited to get into this conversation with you, Greg, and welcome.
Thanks so much, Sarah. It's great to be here. It's awesome.
All right, I wanted to dive right into our first question. What current design market trends and challenges are you seeing in the latter half of 2025, given the recent and hyper dynamic tariff situation?
Great question. We would describe the situation as dynamic for all those different factors, because of all those different factors. I think the biggest thing really we're seeing is client sticker shock, particularly clients that have been not had to do a real estate transaction in some time, and them coming back to the marketplace and realizing how much things have really escalated. And much farther than, much more than just a standard CPI. Like over the past 10 years, if someone had done a lease 10 years ago, done a build out, it might have been $75. Now it's easily could be $150 to $200 easily. And even higher, depending on whose project ecosystem you're working in and exactly what you're building. So that kind of increase is beyond just the kind of the tariffs. Like really, there's the COVID, kind of the COVID situation where it really, the really affected pricing back, during 2020, 2021 into 2022. Those kind of factors have still remained, so we didn't really see a major reduction. Even with the reduction in number of projects, we've seen kind of prices remaining relatively high. So a lot of whatever those supply chain issues that were going on, pre-tariffs, the tariffs just made it that much worse and gave a lot of vendors a lot of excuses to just say, okay, well, we're just going to keep our numbers where they're at just to try and retain. Now, I think other factors within vendors, as far as labor costs, things like that, those things going up, all of those balancing is basically equated to, kind of what I would say is an incredible sticker shock to some clients, where they say, how much do I have to spend to move my organization today? Because I only spent a fraction of that 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. And even the inflation rate doesn't quite kind of equate. So I think that's a big thing. And obviously, I think the return to office uncertainty of how organizations need to address the use of their offices and I would say inadequacy of a lot of organizations to really fully grasp what either the opportunities are, or the benefits, or the challenges to really try and get their teams back in the office full time, or do they even need to? So that uncertainty of how hybrid really affects their individual businesses is still a really huge challenge for, I would say, almost all of our clients. Every single one of them is dealing with it in some way of how do we manage this, how do we plan for this, and then layering on top of that the future of work with the current buzzwords of AI and all those sorts of things, throw a whole other level of things into their operations where how do we plan for space when we don't even know how or what we might be doing over the next in 3 years based on these technological advances. So there's a lot of questions and a lot of challenges to kind of work through, which makes it kind of a real gnarly puzzle for these organizations to kind of really think about what do we really need to do.
And so if I'm hearing you too, it's hard to really put together kind of trends in the sense that it's not a one size fits all approach, and it's very specific to each company. And I know we were talking too earlier about using this concept of people warehousing And that was kind of a pre-COVID term in terms of as a model for office planning, right? So I have this amount of square footage, therefore I'm going to have, these amount of work spots. And that's now quite variable for different companies, right? Again, depending on how they've approached that return to office post-COVID.
Yeah, the trend is there is no trend, like I would say, like, because each client, each business is its own little puzzle that is going to need space in a certain way and be able to kind of utilize that space, but it's all based on their corporate culture, their staff engagement, their actual what they do. And yeah, like I think that like that idea of people warehousing, where like, the real estate question pre-COVID was, all right, you have 100 people, it's 150 square foot per person. That's how much space you need. Let's go.
Right.
And I think, one of the things we've been thinking about recently too is the reason that an office even evolved, if we go back over the past 100 and so years, where these offices have evolved, really, it was before people warehousing, it was about paper warehousing, because you had to come to where the paper was. We were moving paper around, and that's, and I think what we're seeing now too is this, is because things have been digitized, and you're really seeing organizations utilizing, kind of non-physical located, not on-premise servers, not on-premise, kind of machinery.
Right.
They can do everything, in the cloud and virtually. Then that kind of, paper warehousing to people warehousing to kind of manage, to process warehousing, that processing is now happening fluidly in the ether. And so then what does that mean actually for office space? And I think that ultimately, even just that digitization question hasn't really been fully embraced yet. And then we're throwing AI on top of that as well. Like, okay, what if if people aren't even doing this, we're just going to make the computer do it. So that last digitization step is what we're really seeing in a lot of organizations of okay, well, how do, if we can do all of this digitally, then what is the real need for space? And we really need to define it and understand it, of what are those activities that really do need to happen in person. So that, I don't think ultimately we'll get rid of offices. Like, I think people still, people like to be around people, but for all the right reasons. But they don't want to be having to go to a space if they know that their work can be completely digital, then, they don't need to be there.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. That whole digitization and AI conversation for sure has changed the landscape and purpose in being present. So when we are gathering in those office settings, how is that configuration set up for people to do their best work, and that human connection that no matter how much digitization or AI you put into the mix, there still needs that part to grow company culture. And obviously that's going to inform your space usage and space design. No, that's great. Thank you for that. All right, let's move on to our second question. What recommendations do you have for clients who are looking to do more with existing space, given the rising cost of virtually everything in our world?
Well, yeah. And I think the biggest thing when it comes to their space is really taking a beat. Our advice is always to take a beat to really consider what are the opportunities and challenges that your current space is providing. What what are those shortcomings that you're feeling? What are actually the opportunities? Like, and part of that is looking at what's going on, kind of in the businesses around you, and what other companies are doing. Understand what are those opportunities and things that you might not be doing with your space, that could be something that could be energizing, or kind of mission critical, or something that could really kind of help rationalize having space. And really take that minute to kind of step back and think about your space as a real piece of your business strategy, because it is, traditionally it is the second most expensive thing on your income statement of your expenses. So just behind people. Now, interestingly, when we were talking about technology, we're seeing that I think, some organizations' technology budgets are actually because of the nature of subscription software and all that sort of thing, where it's moved out of the CapEx side of things into more of like a, kind of monthly operating thing. We're seeing technology starting to be even more expensive than rent. Like I know for our organization, our rent and technology subscriptions are like neck and neck. So, so again, there's a technology kind of conversation that kind of weaves into that as well, right? Of, okay, we're spending all this money on technology to do certain things. Does the space support that? If we have all this video conferencing, do we, we have, kind of collab software and, all these different things we might be using. Does our space actually support those things so that those two things can work hand in hand, or are they working counter to each other? And how do we rationalize, these things? So really integrating, kind of the thought of what that space as part of your business strategy and how it's going to help your strategy is super important. It's not just bums and seats. Again, it's like that getting people out of that people warehousing mode, right? It's not just about bums and seats. It's like how can this investment that you have to make every month for a space basically help drive revenue and engagement and effectiveness within the organization. And there's all kinds of things. Kind of any organization has some opportunities for productivity gains and engagement gains in their space by just making some of those adjustments. And I think that, so rationalizing how much, that leads to like rationalizing how much space you really need too.
Right.
And I think having that really an understanding of your operations vis-a-vis space and people and technology, and really taking that minute to think, okay, let's really think about what do we really need, and work through those scenarios of, okay, well, if we have 100 people in the office every day, what does that look like? Is that really going to happen? What are they doing? How are they interacting? What if we only had space for, kind of 60 to sit, but like other 40 people could kind of work in cafes, or, and really kind of explore what the different activity design is available to companies today, and which also enables people to kind of reduce, do you reduce that footprint? Because it's the easiest way to reduce your real estate costs is just, okay, you need less space. And I think that, so just getting the space you need. Pre-COVID, what everybody kind of forgets when we were doing workplace strategy with organizations, we would walk into organizations and half their space would be vacant. And that would always be I think we can make do with less. And the answer was always yes, because people were, there was never offices that were 100% people in the office. There's some exceptions like call centers or, kind of certain, kind of trading floors and things like that, where that's like a, very kind of intensive people on premise kind of thing. But everyone forgets that most organizations were like really like not, kind of overly, overpopulated. So even this kind of return, the overall return to work kind of mantra is like, well, they weren't there in the first place before, but we kind of forget because it was, it feels like 100 years ago. So I think, just rationalizing that space allocation is gonna really kind of, then from that piece, it minimizes the investment you're gonna have to make on a monthly basis on rent. And then it also it reduces how much you might need to build or change. And then that leads into, if there's opportunities to reuse existing leaseholds as much as possible, really be strategic with a design partner to make sure that, okay, are we utilizing, kind of built outs that are here as much as we can, because every wall we save, every door we save, that's money that we don't have to spend. Also, really great sustainability, kind of thing too. But the most important thing is no, we just don't if we can make that room, repurpose that room that's currently an office into like a 4-person meeting room, let's do that. We don't need to kind of drop the walls and kind of rebuild it all in a different thing. So, kind of finding those opportunities in that kind of maximization of existing leaseholds is super important, we're finding. And that's where we're seeing really where we can still deliver projects like a much lower rate, but it's because we're like, hey, we're just going to reuse as much as we can and be really strategic about this. I think, and similarly, really looking at what the, furniture and some of the other equipment that folks have, and making sure that we're, really looking at how do we repurpose and reuse this existing furniture. And a lot of times if the client has already gone through kind of that change to like newer, let's say modern workstation standards, those are still applicable today. Like if you've done an office in the past 10 years, chances are those workstation and those components can easily be reconfigured, and you can get another, kind of 10 plus years out of them. I mean, we have some workstations here that are 30 years old, beside the ones that are, 5 years old, and you can't really tell the difference.
Right.
So really, kind of using your inventory and that sort of thing as well, so that you're just reducing that CapEx spend that you need to attack. And I guess our other thing we always tell clients is, work all of this out on paper early. So you can build your scenarios, budget it, fine tune it, because you have 100% control of your budget when it's still just on paper. So, before you commit to doing anything, it's okay, have we really kind of fleshed enough of this out to really understand exactly what all the implications are going to be and how much it's going to be, and are we comfortable with what that is, as opposed to saying, all right, let's sign a lease and then we're going to figure it out as we go, kind of thing. Right. It's you can get a lot of this pre-thinking and strategy kind of and budgeting done, so that you're just eliminating any of the surprises, because anything that you add or change later in the process is inherently more expensive. So right. as that project progresses, if you're a week from move-in and we need to like add an outlet for in a meeting room, because you decide, okay, no, we want the TV over here, that's going to cost 5 times what it would cost if we had it on the paper in the beginning and it was tendered. That's just kind of the nature of, because it's just that much more disruptive in the process. Mm-hmm. So that can eliminate, we can save hundreds of thousands of dollars on paper by just not going down the road to even think about some things, because we can say, well, it'd be nice to have a stair between these 2 floors. That's going to be between $350,000 and $500,000. Is that, kind of digestible in the budget? Yes or no. If it's not, then it's like, great, we're not even going to, we're going to design around not having a stair and utilizing the existing stairs or in the elevator lobbies and that sort of thing. So, we can just kind of eliminate stuff on paper and early to avoid these kind of surprise costs later.
To use an analogy from the design world, it's measure twice, cut once.
Yeah, actually, that's exactly what it is. That's a great way to put it. Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, and just to build on what your theme of repurposing, do you find too that your clients are looking to be designing flexible spaces? So in terms of interior walls and configuration of spaces, we talked a lot about the furniture aspect of it, and I love the sustainability theme that also got weaved in about being able to leverage and repurpose that. But do you find now, in terms of doing more with less, and also just the volatility of the world we're living in and how every day it's changing quickly, someone might find themselves into a 10-year lease, but they want to be able to design a layout that can be flexible. So maybe 3 years into that 10-year lease, they have that opportunity to perhaps shift some of that space to either drive additional productivity, if they're continuing to grow, to accommodate more resources, et cetera.
And that's actually a great point, because I think that going back to the understanding what the strategy and the core of the business is about, and understanding if there needs to be, if we foresee there's going to be a need for flexibility. So we had a client years ago that they took 100,000 square feet. During the design process, which we were designing over part of the year, they bought a couple of companies. And it became very clear that it's like, oh, this is what you guys do. You're going to be doing a lot of this. So we basically, you can design the space so that there was lots of nodes and areas that could be reconfigured with furniture that could become denser or less dense and reconfigured in multiple ways. And so that was part of the early scenario planning to say, listen, we could kind of blow this floor up, could take this many people, or it could take this few people. And just by moving furniture around, no walls, no anything, so that as they occupied that space for 10 years, I think, I forget how many more companies they bought. It was like, let's say it was like another 6 that they themselves were purchased and sold again, and then they were sold again. So all of that change, we didn't actually, so we would help sometimes with some furniture layouts where but they knew where these pockets of change could be. They knew we're like, oh, this new company has 30 people. We know where we have a pocket where we can expand to get 30 more people, and they would just do it. And we didn't need no new permits, no construction, no, like you could actually, we kind of worked ourselves out of any future work for 10 years. But that was the whole point, that you had a facility that was actually, I wouldn't want to say future-proofed, but it almost seemed like it was, because it gave them that flexibility to grow and expand and contract and do all kinds of different things with, as their business evolved, without having to kind of become this massive redo of the facility. And it was just because we knew, that as part of their business was, hey, this flexibility is going to be required. So how do we reflect that in the design? And it was just, that's what it did. And that's the same thing we did with DLL Canada with Encore, was really, kind of, looking at, they basically had 300 people. We built, we put them in an 18,000 square foot space with 30 desks. But 150 people could work in this kind of clubhouse environment that we built. But we also knew that there was a potential that we had to expand the desking. So if they said, okay, well, maybe, if we grow in a certain way, we might really need to have 80 or 90 people here. And it's like, okay, well, here's the pockets of clubhouse, kind of ancillary collab spaces that would convert, to workstations areas at the flip of a hat. We do this in a weekend. And in fact, that's what they're looking at now, is like their, head office has said, hey, we want more bodies back in the office. And they're like, okay, we're just gonna have to get some more desks. But there was a plan. So, they can start flipping their ancillary furniture into workstations, and the whole space doesn't have to be redone again. It's really just hooking up the workstations and away they go. Mm-hmm. So that future flexibility. So you're also kind of limiting that traditional, what used to be a traditional kind of a churn and burn kind of process that would happen in some of these, offices, where there was, someone got promoted to a manager and you have to build an office, right? And okay, well, now we have, division's been, kind of reorganized, so we don't need so many managers. Okay, well, we're gonna get rid of these offices. So there's this kind of constant up and down and changes that instigated architectural changes, building permits, all that kind of stuff. Now, if you can plan it with furniture and standards in a way that it becomes a lot more fluid, then it just makes it so much easier to kind of create these flexible options. So I guess we are working ourselves out of kind of future jobs, but that's it's again, like there's a sustainable story to a lot of that. Mm-hmm. There's an energy and a value to that, to kind of be able to know a client can really live through that space, because I haven't met one client yet that could have a clear picture of where their business was going to be in 5 years.
Right.
The best ones had like a good plan. They kind of knew what if you said, okay, I want you to bet on what scenario you think you're going to be at in 5 years, no one will put a bet down. Mm-hmm. So let alone 10 years. So that, and I think people are back to kind of locking in space for those periods of time. So I think you really do need to kind of, as a business leader, think about how is this space part of my strategy, and how is it going to be flexible as part of my strategy? Just like all the other components that you're kind of like, as you're hiring people, as you're kind of growing leaders and people, and kind of your technology stack and whatever you're using to kind of drive your business. How is the space supporting that whatever that future is going to be.
I think that's great. I really like those insights. And it's one of the reasons in our strategic alliance between Encore and X Design is that shared thinking on behalf of our clients is how can we be flexible? How can we do more with less? And how can we have that optionality going forward as the business evolves, both in how the space is designed and configured, but also in the real estate itself. So this is something that, again, we work with X Design with our existing client base to say, look, I might be in a 10-year current lease, but it needs to evolve and change. It's not fitting my business today. What are the options? And I think that's something that we're working together to collaborate with our shared network of clients, is to say, look, there are options to work with the landlord, as part of an overall portfolio of buildings to look at the current space and see what you can do to modify that, or within additional spaces in that portfolio of properties with that landlord. And so I think that's also something to keep in mind. And I agree with you, is no amount of planning can be done relative to how quickly needs change for a business. And that's what businesses need to be able to be comfortable being uncomfortable in order to grow and grow quickly in the world that we're living in, which is, as we know, radically different today than it was 3-5 years ago.
Oh,
so,
yeah,
that's great.
For sure.
Thanks for that. What role of collaboration do you see between your team's expertise and that of their trusted advisor in real estate?
It's a great question, because we've naturally kind of grown into this kind of role of what we do, and I think as a firm, we've seen our most successful projects have really been started with the real estate conversations, right? And so that the deal structure and everything, we were able to kind of really help form some basis of those deals, provide some real value to decision making, and then that also, like, projects that kind of bloomed from that, it was like such a great foundation because everyone was on the right page, and kind of we were able to kind of all be on the starting block at the same time. I think the number one thing as a designer that we bring is being able to illustrate to a tenant a picture of the future, right? And sometimes I say, like, our job is like to be a bit of a time traveler, right? We paint this, get this picture of the future, bring it to a client and say, listen, this is everything we've talked about and worked through together. This is this picture. This is the future that you're going to have. Do you want to go there? Mm-hmm. And then, they're like, yeah, I really want to go there. And so then, our job is really get them excited about that and then take them through it. So we actually have to, like, time travel them to the future of that future state. So illustrating that future state, what the opportunity is, that's kind of our number one thing, so that a client can really see how their business can be articulated in space. And we all, like, clients are varying levels of kind of understanding, you can look at a plan, but sometimes we've got to do models and VR and whatever to kind of make sure that someone's like, yes, you're seeing it. They're like, literally now we can just get them to stand in it, and they can look around and go, yeah, this is a great picture. So that kind of as a basis is really our kind of number one function, is just, hey, can you see your business in this? Because if you can, that means great. The real estate team's going to go and, like, lease your space. We're going to get deal, and and then we're going to get you. We're going to get you there. I think that that future state, that next really does lead into, like, how do you compare when you're looking at different options? Because sometimes you can walk into a building and go, oh, this looks great, but are the kind of ceilings lower in one or the other? Is this, there's basic things like, are the views nicer or not? Are the windows different? Are they, are the washrooms nicer or not? But also just building to building, each building has its own nuance of, like, how well it plans, and you can take 4,000 square feet in one building and 4,000 square feet in another building, and plans end up completely different just because of the shape of the building, shape of the core, and all those sorts of things. It's part of the magic of going to each of these different buildings is that they're each in themselves their own little snowflakes.
Right.
So being able to kind of do a quantitative analysis and a qualitative analysis of these different sites from a design perspective to say, hey, listen, this one, there might be more leaseholds to reuse in this one. So like, there's a budget delta on this site versus another site, and being able to uncover all those quantitative and qualitative things that will help in framing a real estate deal, right? Because if one building, okay, this looks great, it plans great, but it's it's just going to cost that little bit much more to build in this building than this one. How does that mean that offer or structure of a deal for that building it's going to be more expensive? Then there's going to be a different ask of the landlord. And that's, so being able to contribute to the deal making in the beginning with some real solid things beyond just, oh, I think this one looks prettier than the other one.
Right.
But some real quantitative kind of things to help structure decisions. I think that's really, kind of our biggest value that we're adding in. And again, I think going back to that scenario planning and things as well, of being able to kind of scope and budget things fully for multiple sites so that people understand, okay, if I pull the trigger on this site, this is what the spend's going to be. And if I pull the trigger on this site, this is what the spend's going to be. And really understanding what the deltas are between those different sites. And so, just so that there's some, again, a quantitative, kind of decision making that we can, kind of support with the real estate team and the client.
Mm-hmm. I think that cost benefit analysis with your depth and breadth of expertise in your space is tremendously valuable in selecting that ultimate real estate footprint, because you're right. It goes beyond the shiny, bright object, and what are the costs to get that space optimal for that client,
right,
and being able to weigh that against multiple properties. And I think, with human nature, even in a corporate capacity, it's when you're not sure of the ultimate space, it's also best to be able to understand the space that doesn't work for you, so that when just gets you ultimately closer to that space that will. And then obviously the numbers behind all that is critically important, going back to our earlier question around doing more with less.
Yeah, and I think that you hit on a great thing there too. I think clients too, they and this comes to all the choice that they're making, right? Because they're diving into something that they don't necessarily make. Most clients are only making these decisions on 5 or 10 year kind of things of cycles. So they're really looking to their kind of consultant team to provide some like real market guidance and understand what are they saying no to.
Right.
Like, they want to know that they've looked at the breadth and haven't really, like, it's very easy for a consultant to kind of say, no, this is exactly what you want. This is the one thing. And very often the client will be like, okay, I kind of trust you, but are you sure? What about, and so you have to be able to present it, kind of the solutions in a way that it's like, well, here, listen, I will, yeah, like if you did this is kind of what it would look like. If you did this is kind of what it would look like. So you need to help them see those scenarios and see how those other scenarios, those edge cases or those other scenarios, see this is where this one kind of breaks down, or this one doesn't quite work. So they end up at the end of the process, I would like to say, as knowledgeable as us about like, this is why we decided, because, we used all of this knowledge of what was going to work and what wasn't going to work to really narrow down our focus. And they just need to know that it's like, okay, we've looked at everything. We've done our there's been a due diligence in this. And, the worst thing you can do is just kind of say, trust me, I'm the consultant, just do what I say. That never works. It never, ever works. Because they're, yeah.
Yeah, well, you could say that, but I know with you, it would always be backed up with empirical data points to justify that trust me expression.
But it would still be like but if there's still like, well, what about, there's always like, well, what about, if we haven't, kind of closed off all those other queries, then it's very hard to kind of say, this is the final, this is the final thing.
So, we'll go on to the actual final question, number 4. And I love this one. Okay, what are the biggest mistakes you see clients make when it comes to real estate and design projects? And I know X Design has done hundreds of these, and so you no doubt have so many case studies to draw upon, but what are some standout ideas that come to mind?
Yeah, this is a great question. I think the time, like allowing for enough time for these projects. I think, it's a particular, that might be one of the challenges and trends we're seeing right now too, is that a lot of people have been kind of kicking this, the real estate question for their space down the road a little bit over COVID, because of all this uncertainty and everything. And I totally get it. I mean, and you end up with, okay, the last minute, like, oh crap, we've really got to do something. Because we're coming to the end of our lease. We just renewed for a year, and then but they're hitting the end of this, like how far they can really kick the can down. They've really got to come to terms with it. And again, to really come to terms with it, you've got to take some time, as an organization, as a business, you need to take some time to introspect on, okay, what it is we're really doing, what's going on. And also take that time to really explore what are the opportunities out there. Really get to understand what the dynamics are, and then that the dynamics of the market, particularly the real estate space, particularly in the GTA right now, is really dynamic. Like all of a sudden, just over the past month, it seems like everybody's like in a panic because they're all the banks want more space, so that means everybody's got to sign deals, and it's just like it's kind of gone haywire. So then all of a sudden, you're in this position where it's like, oh crap, I've got to do a deal like really fast. So it's really about being able to take a beat but plan for that time frame. And I think, on smaller projects, it's a minimum 5 to 6 months from the minute of like, hey, we've really got to get our thing together. Like that's a minimum for a small project. For most larger organizations, anything I would say kind of 10,000 square feet and above, you really got to say it's got to be a year of like, all right, we got to start looking for space. We got to start thinking what are our options? What do we need? How does this function into our business strategy? And then, kind of have time for that, a good search, negotiation, and then actual getting the design done in the right way, getting permits and getting it built. And because as you compress any pieces of those, so if you take a 1-year project and try and do it in 6 months, there's a premium you're going to be paying for that. And there's the reality of a discomfort in a lot of those things, because it limits some of the opportunities of things you might be able to kind of do and bring in. So if a particular furniture product or anything you could get might take 8 weeks, but you've only got 6 weeks, like you're eliminating kind of opportunity, product opportunities and vendors and things, because they just might not be able to deliver your project. So you're kind of like, you're down to a very small, kind of vendor pool. And then it's also when a schedule's that tight, you have no contingency time. And so if something goes wrong, so the lights don't show up or something like that, you have no slack in the schedule, and then all of a sudden it's like, great, we can't move into this space. And that's kind of the kiss of death in these projects of if you actually can't get out of your current space into your new space. So allowing for all of that time is, I see it a lot right now where people just have not left enough time and it's crept up on them. And I get it. Listen, our spaces, we just did our Hamilton and Toronto leases. Same thing happened with us. We were like, okay, what do we, it was totally last minute. So it's because the business is doing what, there's so much to manage within the business. When you've got to kind of commit to jump onto this as a major project, because it's a major deal. It's a major disruption for the leadership team, the management team to really kind of carry it through.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, these types of moves, they're hugely strategic, they're costly, time consuming, exciting, but you don't want to be making any of those decisions, as you say, under duress. When you think about what goes into the stages of real estate around, understanding what your future forward space needs are, undergoing that actual real estate search, the negotiation, the design, the permits, the construction, that's a lot. And so being able to allow for ample time to allow each of those stages unfold while also planning for them at the same time is critically important. Absolutely, especially when you are committing to those longer 10, 15-year leases as well. So those are great points. Thanks for that.
Yeah, and I think the other major things we see are like building on that is really in leadership engagement, right? So that the real estate project gets kind of almost demoted down to like kind of a management or staff level, but decision makers are not involved. And again, this gets into like we firmly believe like the space needs to be interwoven within the business strategy itself. So engaging, having leadership at least come to the table to express, listen, this is my expectations, these are the goals, these are the business goals. That's generally where we'll start. But we see very often where leaders are non-present, or they're kind of like a ghost in the room sometimes, but they're not actually actively participating and seeing what these actual opportunities are and seeing how it really does interleave with what the business strategy is. So that can cause a disconnect, and it also just can cause time where there's like that's one of the biggest during when we're mapping out a design phase of a project. It's understanding what the leadership approval process is going to look like, and are the people in the room, or is this going to be like a kind of a multiple layered, multi-tiered approval process, which in some organizations that's just what it is,
right? And
you've just got to kind of work through that. Like if we're dealing with like an international bank or something like that, like listen, there's going to be multi-tiers of kind of local and regional and kind of approvals. We just have to make sure we're fully aware of those processes. But even like smaller organizations, we're seeing where the decision's kind of getting made out over here, but it's not connected to the actual kind of on the ground design decision making, and we've got to kind of we're trying to kind of pull it together and weave it together, and we always kind of try and map out, listen, for the leaders to say, listen, we only need you for these little pockets of time. We need your brains. We need your, kind of your insight. And then that's it. We're very respectful of your time. We're not going to go, we don't need to go furniture shopping for couches together. Like that's not what, we're here for that, to do that stuff. But it is kind of really making sure that those decision makers are fully engaged and into the process, so that they can have a say, and we don't have to kind of re-loop around and things. I think the opposite, there's an opposite of that too, though, is sometimes the leadership is making decisions with very little input or understanding of what the troops are doing. What do they need, and what is that, and so sometimes that's where there need to be a little bit of engagement or an overlap of really understanding what do the troops need. What the leadership kind of has their kind of the big picture, but also is there some sort of layer of understanding of what what those frontline folks really need, because that and that's really just of setting the project up for really good change management of people moving into it, because we know if you're not engaging with some of the other the folks that are actually like, well, this is where the photocopy paper gets delivered and I have to put it, and we have and all those little small things, that's where when those folks move into an office, the staff is like, where the hell does I put the photocopier paper?
Right.
And because the big boss might not ever have to deal with photocopier paper,
right?
But the other folks do. So it's some of the minutia of the operations and things that only really kind of sometimes bubbles up with the staff. So leaders can kind of sometimes be the only face we see, and it's it's dictatorial. Again, it could be part of that particular culture, right? And that's that's what the design has to kind of support. But you really do need to kind of make sure that those other operational opportunities are being addressed, as well as the engagement opportunity, because that change, like moving people from one building to another, any sort of change is real, like just having to get off at a different subway stop, or having to do all of these things can be really disruptive to individuals. And there's a lot of concern, right? There's a lot of worry, and you can actually use these projects as a way to kind of engage with folks to, to kind of tell them what's coming up and be able to communicate it, get them excited about it, as opposed to having them worry about it. Because last thing you want to do is have your staff worried about this whole thing when it's actually going to be better in the end. Like they're going to walk in, it's going to be bright and fresh and clean and new and it's going to be fantastic. So you don't want to go through all the pain and suffering and cost and then have people still be upset about it. So that's just kind of setting a good basis for a really good change management process.
So if I'm hearing you, when I think about the decision around the real estate and the interior design, it's really being intentional and thoughtful in understanding the process, the culture, the nuances of the particular client you're working with, but also critically important to make sure you have executive sponsorship at that C-suite or executive level, but that senior leadership team is also empowering the subject matter experts within the company who will be the right people on a day-to-day basis to champion, make those decisions, but also making sure that the entire team is on board cohesively, and it's not just siloed separate groups, because at the end of the day, ideally you are going to design this space and have this real estate footprint that's going to serve that company and allow them to excel in whatever line of business they're in.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's actually well said. That's a great summary. Yeah, that's exactly what we're feeling is it's just super important important for a successful project.
Oh, that's excellent. Thanks, Greg. Great to meet you today.
No, this is a great conversation. No, I really appreciate it. This is awesome.